Hey everybody, it's Mike here from the Wall of Metal. I haven't done a video in a long time and I felt like I wanted to do one. And all the tumultuous stuff going on in our country right now, everybody's offended about everything. And one of the things that everyone's offended about again is the Confederate flag. Look, I don't care either way. The North won the war. I'm from Indiana. I don't have a Confederate flag. I don't own one, never have owned one. But it has long been associated with Southern rock. And I just wanted to point out that of all the Southern rock artists and albums that I've ever owned or had the pleasure of listening to, I've not really heard any of those artists promote hate or bias or anything other than the image is kind of consistent with their Southern roots and heritage. So this isn't a political statement. Just throwing that out there, basically because the argument over the Confederate flag had me getting back into my Southern rock collection. And today I want to talk about what I own by one of my very favorite bands of all time that I don't think gets the love that they've always deserved, and that is it's a shame that they haven't. But they do have a wildly loyal fan base that even after 40 years, this band is still, or version of the band is still out there putting the music to the masses. And we're talking about Jacksonville, Florida's Molly Hatchet. So let's get into my collection. I've got a lot of different things in different varieties. I got a couple stories that they're going to tie into this. So I try not to make such a long video, but I'm really enthusiastic about this topic, and I'm kind of off the cuff. So, I don't have notes, I don't have prompts. So we'll see how this goes. So let's start with what I have. As you guys can see all this here. So this is the debut album, self-titled Molly Hatchet. And it came out in 1976, 78. I think, I hear the biggest influence in the debut album to me is the Allman Brothers. And a lot of people like to talk about Molly Hatchet and Lynyrd Skynyrd because it was Ronnie Van Zant from Lynyrd Skynyrd that pretty much or as the story goes, discovered Molly Hatchet and was instrumental in kind of helping them make their big break. But to me, it's the guitar tones. They're not really raw or distorted. It's kind of a smooth, jammy kind of Southern rock sound, honestly, on most of the tunes. But the tunes themselves have the riffs. The guitar riffs in the songs are more hard rock kind of riffs, but they're not played with a lot of distortion, a lot of noise in the guitars. And I think that's what makes the first Molly Hatchet album kind of stand out from everything else. Songs like Gator Country especially, and then of course Dreams I'll Never See is basically a cover of a song titled Dreams by the Allman Brothers Band, which the original version is much different than Molly's. So I think Molly Hatchet really kind of put their own flavor and stamp on that song, and actually I think the Molly Hatchet version of the song I personally like it better. But there were hints at what Hatchet would do as far as creating more of a heavier Southern rock sound. Cheatin' Woman, The Creeper, Gator Country, if you can hear it, it's playing in the background now. That to me is that's got that Allman Brothers kind of happy-go-lucky, free Southern vibe. But it's still a fantastic debut album. So I don't have that on vinyl. I'm sure there's many copies out there, so I'm on the hunt to pick that up when I do see it. So moving on, I got some vinyl to show here for a while. This is the second album. This is Flirting with Disaster. This is my favorite Molly Hatchet album, and it's got this has just got great tunes all the way up and down on it, all the way from Whiskey Man. You look at the songs and you name it, they're great. Whiskey Man, Jukin' City, Boogie No More, which is just a great guitar jam. Flirting with Disaster, my favorite Molly Hatchet song. Gunsmoke is a deep cut from the album, is one of my favorite Molly Hatchet songs. Just a fantastic album. Of course, the first two albums were also made popular by the Frazetta art covers. These albums look like they could be death metal bands, or warrior metal, Viking metal. So I mean, imagine in the '70s, I was 8 years old, 9 years old when this came out, and just this looked frightening and it looked but cool at the same time. They even though the image is much heavier than what the music is, this is really, I think, heavy metalized Southern rock. So I think it's just great how the whole image of the band is part of what makes Molly Hatchet such a great a great band. So anyway, I'm yakking again. Put that one away. So enter the third record. Danny Joe Brown, the original lead singer, left the group and was replaced by Jimmy Farrar, F-A-R-A-R. Never knew if I pronounced his name right, but he and released this fantastic third record, Beating the Odds. And I love this album cover. I love the back cover too. I mean, when just that sea of people that they're jamming to. I mean, you pick this up and see that, and you're like, man, this is a good band. Look at that. And stylistically, with the replacement with Danny Joe Brown moving on, there was a little bit of a stylistic change. The band was injecting a little more hard rock into the sound, which kind of makes sense going into the '80s because you had AC/DC put out Back in Black, and I think that really set the tone for about all hard rock music going forward in the '80s. That was the perfect blueprint. And Molly Hatchet, we've got this 3-guitar attack. We should sound a little more, hard-edged. So the more southern element was starting to dwindle, and by this time, there's you hear very little influence of a band like the Allman Brothers. So they've sound-wise gone a long way from the debut to Beating the Odds, and the title track, Beating the Odds, is one of my favorite Hatchet songs. It might be my second favorite. Great song. And deep tracks on this album, the Rambler Sailor, written by Banner Thomas, the bass player. That's one of my favorite Hatchet songs, and it never got any airplay that I know of. Penthouse Popper was the cover tune from CCR. Really just a solid album top to bottom. Great hard rock album. Again, fantastic cover. Just one of those albums that you really like to have in your collection. And this one sounds fantastic because I didn't play it a whole lot. I don't know why I didn't play it a whole lot, but this album's like 30-some years old, 35. It still sounds great. So here's a recent find. I just picked this up a few days ago at one of my local record stores, and this is the fourth album, Take No Prisoners. And it's got the same lineup as the previous, with Jimmy Farrar still as a vocalist. And this album, this is where they kind of had gone, full circle. You started with the debut and the Allman Brothers and the really southern influence sounds, and then you've kind of come full circle to this was just straight hard rock. And there were still southern flavors on it, but this is a hard rock album, an 80s style hard rock album. And with the title track, or the lead-off track, Bloody Reunion, fantastic song. And then that leads into another one of my favorite Hatchet songs of all time, Respect Me in the Morning, which, crazy enough, it wasn't until I became older and more of a collector and enthusiast of music, and one of my favorite things to do with music is seeing what artists are attached to different artists. Like, Danny Joe Brown had his own band, and eventually when we get to it, we're going to talk about Bobby Engram, who is integral to Molly Hatchet now. How he played for Danny Joe Brown and Danny Joe Brown's band before Molly Hatchet, and then he gets brought in for Molly Hatchet, and then players. I just love the connection that you can start making connections. That this guy played in this band, and then he went to this band, and then somebody made a guest appearance on this album, and that's what I think is about neat on this. Respect Me in the Morning has a guest vocal appearance by Baby Jean from Mother's Finest, and I have to bring that tie in here again. I just want to show this because this is one of my very favorite hard rock albums of all time. And I was so happy when I finally found this. Well, I ordered it, so I didn't find it. And it's crazy about you vinyl guys. You've got one of those grail things that you really want to find, and you look. Every time you go out digging, you look, you can't find it. So, I'm going to go ahead and order it because I want it. And then after I ordered it, I swear I probably found it. I just found a copy of this at a record store the other day, and when I wanted it, I could never find one anywhere. But anyway, Baby Jean's she's a great vocalist. This band was fantastic, and leading into the next album, you'll see another connection from Mother's Finest with Molly Hatchet. But if you've never heard of Mother's Finest, who were from Atlanta, Georgia, not too far away from the Jacksonville scene, pick this up. Hard rock, funk. I think this band really broke the race barrier as far as who can rock, who doesn't rock. I mean, this is just, I put this album up against any 80s rock album that came out, any of them. So do yourself a favor and check out Mother's Finest. It's a fantastic record. Iron Age is the name of the album, but this is just a great record. All right, so back to Molly Hatchet. So now for the 5th album, No Guts, No Glory. Just take a look at that. You can see that this is kind of a return to the Southern roots flavor of the band. And Danny Joe Brown makes his reappearance with the band. So Jimmy Farr out, Danny Joe Brown back in, and I'm sure that had a lot to do with redirecting the sound of the band back to the more classic Southern rock sound. And this album has fantastic songs. I really hadn't visited this a whole lot until I picked this up the other day as well, and it's great. This is a great album. The songs aren't properly listed in the back, but anyway, lead off track, what does it matter? Anyway, what great song. Ain't Even Close is one of my favorite songs off this album. It's fantastic. Under the Gun, and of course this album delivered Molly Hatchet's first real, I think, epic song of their own, their Freebird, in Fall of the Peacemakers, which is just a fantastic album. So this album was a really true return to form. I mentioned another Mother's Finest connection. Danny Joe Brown returned to the band, but long time the rhythm section's brand new. So long time bassist Banner Thomas and drummer. Oh my gosh, I'm old. I hate that I have to stop and think about this kind of stuff. Bruce Crump. I know Bruce. Didn't even have to look at it. Came to me. Bruce Crump and Banner Thomas left, so we've got a whole new rhythm section, and you enter some new players now. Riff West on bass, and B.B. Borden is the drummer, and B.B. Borden was the drummer for Mother's Finest. So we've got another connection from Mother's Finest to Molly Hatchet. Also important in the history of the band is this album introduced, no it didn't, he didn't come on until the next record. So anyway, Return to Form, fantastic album. No Guts, No Glory, I love it all the way around. So now we're into the 80s, and Southern rock, the big Southern rock bands of the 80s, most people think of 38 Special and ZZ Top, and Eliminator had come out and changed the format of everything. So the production of Eliminator was slick, keyboards, kind of electronics were introduced into the sound, but it was a very polished and unique kind of 80s flavored sound, and Molly Hatchet was very aware of that. And their next album, The Deed Is Done, would reflect that. In fact, there's a couple songs on here that just, you'd swear they were in the studio next to ZZ Top while they were writing or recording these songs, because not that they didn't rip ZZ Top off, but this album, reflected what was popular in those early 80s, and while it wasn't as epically Southern as the previous albums. There were some great songs on here: "Satisfied Man," "Stone in Your Heart," um, "Straight Shooter" is a really good one. Some really good songs on here. Same lineup as with No Guts, No Glory, except now with this album, when they added the keyboards, John Galvin enters the Molly Hatchet family at this point. Is this the fifth album? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 albums in, now we have John Galvin, who's now playing keyboards in the band. And then now the next studio album, I don't have it on vinyl, but I do have the. As I was growing up in the '80s, we made the transition from vinyl to, first it was cassettes, because you could take them everywhere and listen to them in the car. So cassettes were everything, all the rage. And this is Lightning Strikes Twice. It wasn't received very well by critics, and it did not sell well. But I personally loved this album. I remember listening to this all the time in my car. I mean, I just played the crap out of it. And it's got. I haven't ever showed a cassette yet on any of my videos, but I've got plenty of them. But really nice. This I'm looking for this one. As soon as I find this on vinyl somewhere, I'm going to pick it up. But again, very 80s flavored. There was kind of more. There was more of a southern rock feel on this. And another thing that that no one really points out when they talk about these Hatchet records is, from The Deed Is Done and Lightning Strikes Twice, you started to see a lot of outside writers also. And so, Gary Lubbock and Dwayne Rowland and Steve Holland, Banner Thomas had left of those 2 albums. But, those guys wrote great songs. The songs that came from the first 4 or 5 albums were all original, written by the band members. I mean, each album had at least one cover tune on it, but the classic Molly Hatchet songs are all written by Molly Hatchet. So these 2 records are really kind of the first time that they had outside songwriters. And the cover tune from this was "Hide Your Heart," which was originally done by Kiss. And personally, I've always enjoyed Molly Hatchet's version of it better. But songs on this album that I remember, that were always in my head: "Take Miss Lucy Home," "No Room on the Crew," "Find Somebody New," "The Big Payback," "What's Your Story, Old Glory." This isn't the greatest Hatchet record, but the songs are good. And I remember, this is a record I remember, or a tape I remember playing an awful lot, as a teenager and going into my late teens, early 20s. I mean, emotionally, I guess I have a lot of sentiment for this album, even though I think many of the Hatchet records, even in the second incantation of the band, were probably better. But anyway, there it is. All right, so now after Lightning Strikes Twice, the album didn't sell well. The band kind of started to think about, should we continue? And they sort of disbanded. Now enter 1996. So we went from 96 to when was from 89 to 96. So a 6-7 year hiatus. Not to mention too, Lightning Strikes Twice introduced. There was another lineup change. Dwayne Rowland left the band. No, Dwayne didn't leave. Gary Lubbock left, who was the founding member, and Bobby Engram makes his first appearance, and he looks significantly different now than he did. That, if you can see, Bobby Engram is this guy right here. They were all thinner. We were all thinner. Well, I've always been fat, but most of us were thinner a long time ago. Anyway, the point I'm making is that Bobby Engram now has entered to play guitar. Steve Holland also had left at this point, so Dwayne is the only original Axeman left in the band at this point. But again, you still have John Galvin, who came on an album ago, and now you've got Bobby Engram. So these are guys that are part of the history of Molly Hatchet, and were instrumental in keeping the band going and making Molly Hatchet music. So all right, so enter now a hiatus, and Danny Joe Brown and Bobby Engram decided that they wanted to get Molly Hatchet back out again. But none of the other original members, for whatever reason, I haven't really studied the history of that, but nobody was really on board with it, and nobody joined. But you still have, so you had Danny Joe Brown, Bobby Engram, and John Galvin. So those three important parts of the Molly Hatchet, world, wanting to get out and keep Molly Hatchet going. So they went on tour, and this is one. I'll try to tell this story. This is going to be a long video. I'm trying to tell the story. This is a great story, though. So I was living in Chicago, moved up there in '92. So it would have been like sometime, probably '96, because that's when the album came out. Maybe before that, '95, '96. I went to see Molly Hatchet at some roadhouse somewhere in the outskirts of Chicago. I don't even remember where it was. I didn't even know at the time that anywhere around suburban Chicago had BFE in it. But when I got to this place, sure enough, it was BFE somewhere. But there's a roadhouse, and Molly Hatchet played, and I had never seen Molly Hatchet, so I was very excited about this. So went in, see the show. Danny Joe Brown comes out, and you can tell he is drunk, like he was fucked up like a football bat. Okay, but despite that, he was able to sing and perform, and he got through the show. So that was my first live experience with the band. So now concert's over, and I go back out in the parking lot, and everybody's kind of filtering out. And I like to just kind of hang out. I don't like to get in the traffic, so I'm just kind of hanging out. And I see the band's tour bus, and some random dude just leaves the parking lot, goes up to the bus, knocks on the door. Door opens, the dude goes in. So I'm like, I wonder. So I just happened to be armed with my Flirting with Disaster CD. So I went up to the tour bus, and I knocked on the door. The door opened, and lo and behold, somebody from Molly Hatchet says, "Hey, what's going on?" And long story short, I was invited into the tour bus. I was invited to party a little bit, and I didn't do that at the time. I wasn't a drinker. I had never taken any drugs. I was naive then. I wasn't even sure. I might not even know what kind of forms of paraphernalia even were to see it, but I do know they were doing something on this bus. And Danny Joe Brown was still drunk, but everybody was very polite. And I saw Danny, and I remember asking, I don't really want to party, but I wondered if Mr. Brown could sign my CD for me. So sure enough, it's very hard to see because it's in some of them are a little bit easier to see. Actually, his is really easy because he signed like on the white. So Danny Joe Brown autographed my CD. The other guys in the band, there's Bobby Engram on that side. Now Danny Joe Brown was the only guy in the band for Flirting with Disaster, but the entire band autographed my CD someplace. And there's a couple more of the others. So you had Brian Bassett. I want to know who these guys were. You had Brian Bassett, was the other guitar player, and he had come up through the Southern rock world. Matt Crawford, I think, was the guitar player. I could never find the credits when I'm looking for him. It was Matt Crawford. Andy McKinney is a bass player. Andy McKinney. And so that was the band for the reunited version of Molly Hatchet. So that was in there's a kind of in, I don't know who's signed like in the very back, but kind of like it's ink on red. It's hard to see, but you can clearly see Danny Joe Brown's there. So that's really awesome. So this CD is very special to me. Also in the CD, here's a ticket stub from a show on Friday. It was Friday, June the 3rd in 2011 at the 8 Second Saloon, which is it's just a concert venue in Indianapolis, Indiana. And the version of the band at the time, everybody signed my ticket. So I keep this in this autographed Molly Hatchet CD as part of all of my memorabilia. So anyway, just a neat story. I had a chance to party with Molly Hatchet and I blew it because, I was a boring guy. But I met the band, was on their tour bus, got their autographs, and that was an experience that will, always live with me. So now, enter 1996. Danny Joe Brown, clearly was starting to not, be his self, but the band wanted to continue, so he handpicked a guy to take over for him, and that was Phil McCormick. And that version of the band began what I call Mach 2, Molly Hatchet Mach 2 version, which is a big form of debate for some fans. Some fans just refuse to accept that as Molly Hatchet. They say, it's a cover band, yada, yada, yada. Well, I won't entirely disagree, but here's my thing. You have guys in this version of the band that were clearly rooted in the history of Molly Hatchet. So John Galvin is still in the band, Bobby Engram is in the band, and Danny Joe Brown is, was intended to perform on this album, and he's credited on it, but he doesn't perform. So to me, that is Molly Hatchet. And the thing is, you could think of them as a tribute band because they're playing the old Molly Hatchet songs, but none of those guys are there. But they're recording new music, and they're recording new music in the flavor and vein of what Molly Hatchet is and what Molly Hatchet symbolizes. And to me, I think that's pretty awesome. It's like, you can see Kiss, Eugene Simmons has said many times, when Gene and Paul are gone, and Ace and Peter are no longer part of it, you can get 4 musicians and put them in that makeup and get them and get them on the stage, and Kiss can go on. Molly Hatchet very much the same way. So I think that I think it's great that that Bobby Engram purchased. He might not have been he might have backdoored some of the original members. I haven't gotten into all that history, but in long story short, Bobby Engram purchased all the rights from Molly Hatchet management to now be to kind of own and be the main rock of what would be Molly Hatchet going forward. So now let's talk about the products that they put out. Their first album was Devil's Canyon, and all these are on CD that I have. And this was a great album. I mean, it kicked ass, and it had the Molly Hatchet sound, but the guitars were more rock, hard rock, and a little distorted, and it sounded like a mid to late 90s hard rock version of what Southern rock would sound like. And Southern rock wasn't really on the rise, so I think they were trying to resurrect that genre with this record, and it's fantastic. Songs like the title track, Down from the Mountain, Rolling Thunder, or Down from the Mountain is not the title track, the leadoff track, Rolling Thunder, the title track, Devil's Canyon, Tatanka, great song, Come Hell or High Water, The Journey, and going forward after Fall of the Peacemakers from No Guts, No Glory, every one of these albums, and oftentimes it would be the title track of the album, not in this case, but every one of these Mach 2 Molly Hatchet albums had some kind of epic song on it that had that it's a kind of a melancholic opening that just turns into a rip-roaring guitar attack jam, and this version of the band pulled it off really well. This is a great album. Oh, and we'll talk about it later because I've already forgotten it. So now, enter 1998, 99, 98. This is the second album by that version of the band. This is The Silent Reign of Heroes. Great song. This is a great album. It's got one of my favorite Molly Hatchet tunes of all time, Blue Thunder. Other great, Saddle Tramp. That's a great song, one of those jam songs. It's not a cover of Charlie Daniels Band. This is a Molly Hatchet original. Miss Saturday Night, The Silent Reign of Heroes, Junkyard Dog. Fantastic album. And again, you know, you're not talking about a bunch of guys who are just going out on stage and rehashing old songs. These guys are putting out new songs, new material, and it's good stuff. It's good. If they named themselves something other than Molly Hatchet and put these albums out, people would, oh, that's good music. Why not? Why not? Why can't it be Molly Hatchet? You know, so I'm all for it. I always have been. So now we're into the 2000s now, 2001. This is the third Hatchet album with the Bobby Engram lineup. I'm not going to go into. There's been a couple of changes on these, not many, but what you've had consistently through all of these albums were Bobby Engram and John Galvin. Gosh, it's hell to get old. So you've had Bobby Engram and John Galvin on all these albums. So you have a tie to classic Molly Hatchet. But anyway, another good album. Got some really good songs on it. White Lightning is one of my favorites off of here. One Last Ride is great. It's one of those epic-y songs. Cornbread Mafia, Heart of the USA. You know, good Southern rockin' stuff. You know, Molly Hatchet. I'm digging it. Always did dig it. Now we're getting to the end of the two. We're getting to 2005, mid-2000s. This one is the Warriors of the Rainbow Bridge. You can see, you can also continue all the albums kind of have that epic-y, doomy warrior kind of album cover stuff. You know, again, what do you think of when you think of Molly Hatchet? You know, you think it's an image and a sound, and that's what you're getting with this version of the band. Great songs here: "Son of the South," "Roadhouse Boogie," "Get in the Game." That's one of my favorites. And then "Rainbow Bridge," title track, is another one of those epic-y songs. Good album, good solid album. And then enter the 2010. And this is the final, or so far, the last studio album the band's produced. But this is Justice. And a very important thing about this album and Rainbow Bridge is you had the reappearance of Dave Lubbock. So here you have the original founding guitar player, legendary guitar player in the band and going on the road and touring with him. And I can tell you, when I saw that show in 2011, in support of this Justice album, I showed you that ticket stub, they were smoking hot. That was one of the best concerts that I have ever seen, ever. They were that good. The songs were great. The performance was great. The energy was great. And, you know, that was 9 years ago, and things have changed in 9 years. I know that if you've seen any clips of the band now. But in 2011, this band that was Molly Hatchet was fire. They were straight badass, and I'll just take that side. You can debate all you want whether it's Molly Hatchet, but I was seeing Dave Lubbock up on the stage, and they were playing Molly Hatchet songs, and they sounded great, and it was new songs that were great, classic songs that were great. Concert was fantastic. Molly Hatchet was badass. So that's the last studio album. Now, there's been I want to show a couple things. There's been some compilations. The classic compilation. This is the greatest hits compilation. You know, we've already talked about all the songs that are on here, but there were two new studio tunes on here that were great. Ragtop Deluxe and Shake the House Down. And I had this on cassette at some point too, and I played it all the time in my car. I remember playing it all the time. And then I picked up recently, you know, here's the Essential Molly Hatchet. A few different tunes on it, but you know, this encompasses pretty much everything up through the Deed is Done album. So none of these compilations are of Mach 2. Now, there have been some different albums that the Mach 2 lineup have put out. There's a couple of albums of cover albums. You know, I've got those in my digital collection, but I don't have physical copies of them. And there's another. They just released a live album with their newest vocalist, and at the time, I'm sorry, I should know, but I can't come up with his name because, tragically, Phil McCormick, who had been the longtime vocalist through the Mach 2 version, he passed away, and Dave Lubbock passed away a couple years ago. So, sadly, the original members of the band are all gone. We've lost all of them. The only remaining member is Steve Holland, and I don't know if he plays music now or what he does. But everyone else has passed, which is part of the tragic history of most, Southern rock. Most of the purveyors of the genre, they're all gone, and we just don't have. They're really not. There really isn't new Southern rock coming. I mean, there have been some bands that have kind of carried on the tradition, but nobody's been mainstream popular with big records. And of course, the record industry and the music industry is all different now anyway. But Southern rock is just something that it's unfortunately it's kind of prehistoric anymore. So that was one of the reasons why I was happy that Molly Hatchet continued to live on. Now, I would make a plea to Bobby Engram if for some reason you see this video. Thank you, Bobby, for keeping the band and the spirit alive. But my God, you can't have Molly Hatchet with just you as a sole guitarist. You got to recruit a couple hot six stringers that can really fire and play, and get a couple more guitar players in the band. The rhythm section's solid now. You still got John Galvin, so you still have that tie to classic Molly Hatchet, but you can't be up there you just can't be up there one guitar. You can't do Flirting with Disaster with one guitar. So please, if you're going to continue and make new music, which I would love to see, get a couple more hot guitar players and give us some new Molly Hatchet that just kicks our ass and makes us smile. That would be great. The last thing I haven't shown, is there was their first live album, Double Trouble Live. I was kind of listening in the background, you could hear it, and it's a really good live album, great live album, and it covers kind of all the phase one classic Molly Hatchet. So that's my collection of Molly Hatchet. I can't say enough good things about the band. I love their whole discography. I could listen to Molly Hatchet anytime. Flirting with Disaster is one of those songs that, you got some songs that you love that you even do get tired of. And if it's on the radio, you turn it off. My God, Boston, any song by Boston. I love Boston, love the songs, but, Boston just gets played and played and played. And, it's almost, if I hear one of those songs, change the station. Flirting with Disaster is one of those tunes that when it comes on, the station stays and the volume knob goes up, and to me that's one of my all-time favorite songs of all time. So to get to meet Danny Joe Brown and have him autograph that album, and to get to see the band both, I wish I could have seen the classic version of the band in their heyday, but I was I was young and I didn't see my first concert till 1981. But I love Molly Hatchet. They've got a great discography. They're a fantastic band, and I hope they're not done. I hope to see some changes, but I hope that the spirit of that band can continue, because I would buy a new record of studio tracks, and I'll follow the band as long as they keep doing it, as long as they're doing it well. So feel free, if you sat through all this, let me know what you think. Drop in the comments, what are some of your favorite Hatchet albums, favorite songs. I was gonna maybe rank them my favorites. As long as we've done this, I've probably got time to do it. I think if we had to rank my favorites, the studio wise, Flirting with Disaster would be number one. Honestly, I think I've got to have the debut as number two, just because it sets the stage for what Molly Hatchet is. And then I would go with Beating the Odds is great, but as far as overall quality of an album goes, I'd have to go with No Guts, No Glory. That would be number three for me. And then, of course, then we'd have Beating the Odds. And then I would go with Take No Prisoners. And probably... now, The Deed Is Done and Lightning Strikes Twice, great original, albums, but we're talking about the whole Molly Hatchet family, and I think I'd have to go with, I think I like Devil's Canyon better than either one of those two albums. Maybe, again, I kind of have a sentimental attachment to them, with Lightning Strikes Twice and The Deed Is Done, but I think some of these Mach 2 albums are better than that as far as quality and song goes. But So a Devil's Canyon would have to be the one that's in there, and then I would go with Silent Reign of Heroes, and then I'd fit in the last of the classics. We'd go with The Deed Is Done. I'd probably put Lightning Strikes Twice in front of that because I listen to this album more. So these two are probably a tie. They're my least favorite of the original, of the old version. And again, I think these two of the Bobby Engram era albums were better than both of those. And then we'd end up with Kingdom of Warriors of the Rainbow Bridge, and then Kingdom of 12, and then Justice. And even if I might rank this last, that doesn't mean that it's a bad album. It's just, their stuff is so great. That's where I'd put it. So ironically, I've got 40 minutes worth of video to cover 40 years worth of Molly Hatchet. So 40-40, I call that good. So yeah, tell me what you think. Let me know what records you've got. If you've got any memories, Molly Hatchet stories, let's hear them. So again, the Southern heavy metal. One time I kind of called Molly Hatchet the AC/DC of Southern rock. Not just because of their guitars and the way they shredded and sounded and rocked hard. But I think that the image of the band, the music that they put out, I think you can firmly put that under the umbrella of heavy metal. So like I always say, let them know your metal, bang your head and throw the goat, and I'll catch you next time with another topic.